Emily's breath caught as the ground trembled beneath her boots. 200 rifles, leveled in unison, each gleaming barrel pointed squarely at her. A soldier's crisp voice cut through the dawn mist. Emily Miller, step forward. You have a message to deliver. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me. This is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. The air over Ashford's Market Square lay thick with dawn's pale light, as if the sun hesitated before spilling its warmth over the cobblestones. Tender wisps of mist curled between lampposts, pooling in the hollows where yesterday's rain had gathered. A soft breeze carried the mingled scents of damp earth, brewing coffee from a corner cafe, and the faintest whisper of frying bacon. Somewhere beyond the mist, a bell tolled 6 times, its clear tone folding into the hush. Emily Miller stood at the threshold of the Ember and Ash Diner, her palms pressed against the cool brass of the door handle. The diner's neon sign, once a bright ruby-red flame, flickered now in muted protest to the morning chill. She paused a moment, letting the familiar weight of her insulated jacket settle around her shoulders, and inhaled deeply. There was comfort in this routine. The soft clink of porcelain cups, the low hum of the grill warming up, the friendly nods of early patrons who came for strong coffee before sunrise. Yet today, a knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach, reminding her of everything she'd left undone. Inside, the kitchen staff moved with practiced precision. Ollie, the short-order cook with unruly auburn hair, flipped pancakes with a deft flick. His stained, apron-red world's best uncle, though he'd been single for as long as Emily could remember. Behind him, Riley, a college kid juggling classwork and weekend shifts, arranged platters of eggs and toast with nervous haste. Emily's voice cut through the sizzle of butter on the griddle. "Morning, Ollie." "Riley, how's the new study schedule?" Riley glanced up, eyes bright with caffeine and half-formed sentences. "Surviving, thanks to your tips on time blocking. Professor Harris will be impressed, maybe even curve the midterm curve." She smiled, but the gesture felt thin. Beyond these walls, her own life felt increasingly adrift. Since her mother's accident 6 months ago, she'd taken on 2 jobs to keep their little apartment afloat and to help her younger brother, Lucas, who still woke screaming at night. Each morning, she shoved those fears behind a mask of cheer and competence. "Good," she said, stretching out her arms to loosen the ache in her shoulders. "Table 3 is mine. I'll grab the coffee pot first." She moved into the dining area, where mismatched booths lined the walls and a long counter of swivel stools looked out onto the street through a row of steamed-up windows. She filled the large chipped silver urn with fresh grounds, Sumatra blend her favorite, and poured hot water until the aroma curled up around her. Then she carried mugs to waiting customers, exchanged laughter and stories, tucked $20 bills into wallets, and scribbled orders onto worn pads. An hour passed in a blur of grease and chatter, and by the time the morning rush slowed, Emily felt her back protest each step. She wiped sweat from her brow and thought of home. Lucas clutching his blanket, their tiny kitchen that smelled of tomato soup and stale cereal, the half-written tuition letters she'd shoved into a drawer. She longed to be there, to press her forehead against the cool glass of his bedroom window and watch him sleep peacefully again. She slid into one of the booths, lifted a paper bag she'd set aside before her shift, and unwrapped a ham and cheese sandwich. It was meant for the man she'd spotted yesterday afternoon. His face half hidden beneath the brim of a worn cap, his hands trembling as he asked for change. She'd handed him the extra chicken salad that never made it to an order, watched his eyes fill with unshed tears, and felt something thaw inside her hardened heart. She took a bite, imagining the startled gratitude in his eyes. He'd told her his name was Daniel, though she wondered if that was real. Today, she planned to bring him coffee and the sandwich before heading home. One more good deed, she told herself. One more kindness before the day turned its back. She checked her watch. 9:15. Enough time. Emily stood, gathered her bag, and headed out. The mist had lifted. Sunlight fractured through the trees lining Maple Avenue, where Daniel usually sat on a battered park bench. Fallen leaves crackled under her boots as she approached. He sat hunched, shoulders bowed, a ragged blanket at his feet. Steam drifted from the cup of coffee she carried, too hot for his rough hands, but a promise of warmth nonetheless. "Morning," she said softly, setting the sandwich beside him. "Thought you might like something to eat." Daniel looked up, and for a moment Emily caught her breath. His eyes were an extraordinary green, like that of a forest glade after rain. Lines etched around them hinted at stories she couldn't guess. He murmured thanks, his voice low and cracked, and reached for the sandwich as if it were a treasure. "God bless," he whispered, and raised the mug in a small, trembling salute. She nodded, offered a tentative smile, and stepped back along the path, her heart pounding. As she walked away, she glanced back. Daniel closed his eyes against the sun, took a sip, and his shoulders straightened, just for a moment, before the weight of the world settled back onto him. Emily carried on toward the subway station, her mind half on her errands, half on the stranger. She wondered if she should have asked more about him and offered something else. A job lead, a place to stay. But even her own troubles felt too heavy, and she'd learned that sometimes small gestures were all she could manage. At the station, she tucked her bag beneath her arm and waited for the train. The screech of metal wheels approaching mingled with the distant call of a hawk overhead. She pressed her palm to the cool tile wall, closed her eyes, and drew in a shaky breath. When the train arrived, she boarded, finding a seat by the window. Outside, the city unfolded in streaks of gray and gold, tenements, billboards, swollen gutters still drying from last night's rain. A child's laughter echoed somewhere, and a dog barked as its owner hurried past. She listened to the clack of the tracks beneath her and let her thoughts drift. Emily thought of Lucas, waiting for her to come home. She pictured his hopeful grin, the way he'd throw his arms around her legs and ask about her day. She'd promised him a movie night, popcorn, and blankets on the couch, maybe reading him one of her favorite fairy tales. She owed him that much. The train swung around a curve, and through the window she caught sight of marble pillars and crimson banners, the gates of Fort Ashford, where the soldiers were stationed. A cold shiver ran down her spine, though she couldn't say why. She'd passed this base 1,000 times, unnoticed, just another civilian on her way. Yet today something in the air felt different, an unspoken tension like the hush before a storm breaks. She shook her head, brushed her hair from her face, and stepped off 2 stops later. The streets here were narrower, the buildings older. Ivy climbed the brick facades, and green-painted shutters hung askew beside scorched windows. She navigated the back alleys to her apartment, where the door opened on a narrow hallway lit by a single flickering bulb. Inside, Lucas sat cross-legged on their threadbare sofa, headphones around his neck, eyes glued to a handheld game. He glanced up as she entered, and his face lit with relief. "Em," he exclaimed, leaping up, "I thought you'd never come back." She dropped her bag, scooped him into her arms, and he hugged her so tightly she nearly toppled. His warmth seeped into her bones, easing some of the day's tension. "I'm here, okay?" she whispered. "I'm here." He pulled back and studied her face. "You look tired." "I am," she admitted, smiling through her weariness. "But I'm okay." He frowned. "I's serious for a boy of 10. Mom would say to take care of yourself." Her chest tightened at the reminder of their loss. Since the accident, the house felt empty in ways neither of them could fill. She kissed Lucas on the forehead and led him to the tiny kitchen. "Movie night?" she asked, pulling popcorn from a jar. "I found that old fairy tale book you love." His grin returned. "Yes." As she set up the living room, she let herself believe that everything might be okay, at least for tonight. But outside, beyond the thin walls and dusty floors, a distant roll of thunder rumbled. Whether from storm clouds or some other gathering force, Emily couldn't tell. She didn't yet know that her simple act of kindness in the park would send ripples through worlds she could scarcely imagine, nor that by tomorrow morning 200 soldiers would be marching toward her door. For now, the lights were dim, The popcorn was warm, and Lucas's excited chatter filled the room. And in that fragile calm, Emily closed her eyes and held on to hope, unaware of how violently the calm would shatter come dawn. The sun had scarcely created the horizon when Emily stepped into the Ember and Ash Diner that crisp morning, her breath clouding in the chill as she fumbled for the lock. The door swung open to a hush far deeper than any weekday lull. She froze, apron half tucked under her arm, and listened. No sizzle of the grill, no clink of cups, only a distant rhythmic thud. Curious and uneasy, she followed the sound out the back door and down the alley, heart stuttering as it grew louder, thud, 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 like a heartbeat in the pavement. She emerged behind the diner's brick facade onto Market Square. There, instead of the usual stray dog or drifting newspapers, 200 soldiers stood in perfect formation, boots planted in neat rows that stretched from the fountain at the square's center all the way to the edge of the cafe umbrellas. Each wore a uniform of dark olive, insignias glinting on their collars. Their faces were stoic, framed by the rising light, their eyes fixed not on Emily, but on the now empty bench where Daniel had sat yesterday. A tall man in front, a captain by the look of his polished belt buckle and leather gloves, strode forward. His crisp voice carried across the cobblestones. Emily Miller recalled, even from here, she could see the sharp line of his jaw, the gray at his temples. She swallowed hard, stepping toward him. "That's me," she said, though her voice trembled. Behind her, the diner's door creaked and Ollie and Riley emerged, matching her confusion with worry. The captain's gaze ran over her as though reassessing everything. "I'm Captain Aaron Blake of Fort Ashford," he announced. "You are to come with us at once." His tone held no question. Soldiers shifted. Murmurs rippled through the ranks like wind through dry leaves. Emily's breath caught. With you," she whispered. "Why? I don't—" The lump in her throat squeezed. "This must be a mistake." Blake's eyes flicked to the empty bench, then to the diner's neon sign flickering behind her. "Yesterday afternoon," he said, "a man claiming the name Daniel spoke of you over and over. He said you would guide him back to his post. He said you've been entrusted with something of utmost importance." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "We believe you hold the key to his recovery." Recovery. That word rang strangely in her mind. Riley stepped forward, voice sharp. "Recovery? You mean he's sick?" Blake shook his head slowly, lips compressed. "No illness known. He vanished from the base 2 weeks ago, delirious and muttering about a promise. He told our sergeants you fed him and gave him comfort." His next words landed like a hammer blow. "We have reason to suspect he's carrying a message, an order that only you can deliver. If it falls into the wrong hands," he left the threat dangling in the cold air. Emily's mind raced. "I don't understand. I just gave him some food, a coffee." She glanced toward the bench where fragments of her kindness still lingered, a discarded napkin, the imprint of her footsteps in the dew-soaked grass. "He looked lost," she murmured. I wanted to help." Behind her, Ollie wrapped an arm around Riley's shoulder, their faces pale. The morning felt suddenly enormous, as if the sky itself leaned in to watch. Blake's stance softened ever so slightly. "You did a good thing. But we think that act awakened something in him, something tied to this," he said, producing a small, weathered locket from an inside pocket. It bore the insignia of the 88th Infantry Division, the same unit Daniel had served in. Emily felt a tremor in her chest. She recognized the insignia from the Old War Museum exhibition she'd visited as a girl with her mother. "He gave me this," the captain said. "He said you knew what to do with it." She took the locket with trembling fingers. The metal was cool, the hinge stiff from disuse. Inside, a faded photograph of a young soldier with eyes as green as Daniel stared out. Emily's breath caught on the echo of those eyes, the intimate weight of his secret pressed into her palm. She looked up at Blake. He said, "What exactly?" His face was grave. He said, "Only she can lead us home." He let those words hang, and Emily felt the air crack around her. Behind Blake, the soldiers shifted, boots scraping on stone. Their rifles gleamed, silent but present. Emily sensed a tightening of purpose, an expectancy that settled over her like a cloak. A flicker of betrayal flared. Had Daniel used her? Was this kindness simply the bait for some greater demand? Her heart thundered as she considered the possibility that she'd become an unwitting pawn in a game of loyalties and orders she could barely fathom. She looked back at the empty bench again, wondering if Daniel had climbed to his feet and walked into the shadows or slipped away while she wasn't watching. The locket felt heavy, its secret a burden she had never asked to bear. What was she supposed to do? Lead an army? Deliver a message she didn't fully understand? And why had Daniel confided in her, a stranger in an old coat? Riley stepped to her side. "Ain't what do we do?" Her friend's eyes were bright with fear and something else, resolve. Emily pressed the locket closed and met the captain's gaze. "First," she said, voice steadier than she felt, "I need to know where he is now." Captain Blake nodded, signaling to a soldier behind him. The soldier saluted, then spoke into a field radio. Emily watched him, aware that with each breath she took, her ordinary life slipped further out of reach. Behind them, a single black cloud drifted across the sun, casting the square into a gray shadow. Emily felt its coolness brush her cheek, as if the world held its breath, waiting for her answer. She swallowed, anchored herself against the tide of uncertainty, and turned back to Blake. "I'll help," she said, almost in a whisper. But even as the words left her lips, doubt gnawed at her resolve. What lie lay beneath Daniel's gratitude? What betrayal had she stumbled into? And by the time the captain's soldiers began to move, tightening their ranks around her, Emily knew in her bones that nothing would ever be the same again. Emily leaned against the low stone wall of Fort Ashford's parade ground, the locket warm in her palm as dawn light gleamed on polished helmets. Captain Aaron Blake stood beside her, arms crossed, watching the soldiers fan out across the grass. Beyond their ordered lines, the ancient oak trees framed a horizon of rolling fields, beauty tinged by the tension in the air. Emily's heart thudded. She wondered if she could ever slip back into the rhythms of her old life. Blake broke the silence. "You recognized the insignia from the War Museum," he said softly. His voice, low and calm, held no accusation, only curiosity. Emily nodded, fastening the locket into the pocket of her jacket. "My mother used to take me there. I always felt something untold hiding just beneath the surface of those exhibits." She paused, meeting his gray eyes. "I never thought I'd be holding a piece of it." Aaron studied her, the early sun reflecting off his clean-shaven cheekbones. "You have a way of seeing what others overlook," he observed. Emily let a small smile flicker, surprised by his gentleness. "Perhaps," she replied, "or perhaps I simply know what it's like to be unseen." The walls she'd built around her grief had sharpened her powers of observation. She'd learned to watch without being fully seen. Behind them, Sergeant David Hughes approached, his boots clicking sharply on the cobblestones. His dark hair was cropped close, his jaw tense. He stopped a respectful distance away, eyes flicking to Emily. "Captain," he said, nodding, "our intel suggests Daniel may have headed toward Blackwood Ridge, following old supply routes." He handed Aaron a folded map, which Aaron passed to Emily. At her touch, the paper creased beneath her fingers. "Blackwood Ridge," she whispered, tracing the path. Memories of childhood hikes with Lucas drifted through her mind, sunlight dancing on ferns, the faint echo of distant waterfalls. Now, those same woods felt like the threshold to some hidden world. She lifted her gaze to Aaron. Why would he go there? His expression tightened. He was stationing supplies for an operation 3 months ago. The orders were rescinded, but something must have drawn him back. Emily closed her eyes, imagining Daniel's green gaze, haunted yet resolute. "He trusts me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever he's chasing, he believes I'll help him find it." Aaron's lips curved in a rueful half-smile. That faith could be a blessing or a trap. Emily shivered, recalling the echo of Riley's fear when she'd left home. Lucas's smile at their movie night. Ollie's easy laugh at the diner. Suddenly, each was a tether she might have to sever. Sergeant Hughes cleared his throat. "Captain, orders?" Aaron folded the map, slipping it back into his pocket. "We move at first light. Emily, you'll lead with us." Her breath caught. She nodded, though every instinct screamed to run back to the Ember and Ash Diner to the safety of routine. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. "All right." That afternoon, they camped at the forest's edge. The soldiers set up tents and ration fires while Emily and Aaron walked beneath towering pines, their boots muffled by a carpet of needles. Light filtered through the branches, leaving shifting patterns on their faces. Emily clutched the locket in one hand, tracing the insignia with a thumb. What did Daniel want her to find? What secret lay hidden among these trees? Aaron studied her profile. "Tell me about your brother," he said gently. Emily stopped, surprised by the question. She had expected tactical orders, not tender curiosity. She turned to him, surprised by the warmth in his eyes. "Lucas, he's 10. I love video games and that old fairy tale book. Since our mother's accident, he's been fragile. I promised him I'd keep him safe." She paused, voice thick. "It's why I took care of Daniel. I couldn't bear to think he was suffering alone." Aaron nodded. Protectiveness can be a strong motivator. He pointed to a distant ridgeline. "You know, in my family we have a saying, a promise is the soldier's oath." His gaze drifted to the horizon, as though the memory of those words came from far away. Emily felt the weight of his unspoken past, told in the silence between them. "I'll keep my promise," she said softly, offering him a steady look. That night, they sat around the flickering fire. The soldiers' low conversations and the crackle of embers created a fragile comfort. Riley emerged from a tent, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and dropped beside Emily, who'd chosen a log as her seat. "I'm sorry," Riley whispered. I should have come with you." Emily shook her head. "You have school, and Uncle Ollie needs you at the diner." Riley's lip trembled. "I'm afraid, what if we fail him?" Emily took her hand, squeezing gently. "We won't. We have to believe he led us here for a reason." From the darkness beyond the circle of firelight, a branch snapped. Soldiers immediately sprang to their feet, rifles raised, eyes scanning the shadows. Emily's heart pounded as Aaron moved beside her, hand hovering near his holster. He whispered, "Stay low." She dropped to her knees, hands pressed to the ground, breath catching as more twigs snapped. Fear pooled in her gut. Fear for the men she barely knew and the brother waiting at home. But when Private Nolan peeled back a branch, it was only a fox, its russet tail disappearing into the underbrush. Laughter rippled through the company, tension melting away. Emily exhaled, the adrenaline leaving her limbs weak. Aaron's gaze softened as he offered her a hand. She took it gratefully, and in that moment, she sensed the fragile bond forming between them, a trust born of shared vulnerability. The next morning, they entered Blackwood Ridge. The air was damp, echoing with distant bird calls. Emily walked between Aaron and Hughes, the locket tucked safely in her jacket. Branches scraped her cheeks, and the scent of moss and earth enveloped her. She felt Daniel's presence in every rustle, every whisper of wind, as though he watched her from the shadows, guiding her steps. As they climbed a rise, they came upon a clearing dotted with derelict stone foundations. Old warehouses, half collapsed, lay hidden beneath ivy and ferns. Emily's pulse quickened. Here, Daniel might have hidden supplies or stashed secrets. She knelt beside a sunken doorway and brushed away a clump of soil, revealing a metal hatch. It was locked, the surface pitted with rust. She glanced at Aaron. "Help me with this?" He nodded, and together they pried at the edges until the hatch gave way with a groan. Inside lay crates stamped with the 88th insignia, wrapped in oilcloth. Emily lifted one carefully and set on the ground. Her gloves left smudges on the coarse wood. She unfastened the straps and opened the crate's lid. Inside lay stacks of letters, tied in bundles, each addressed to various soldiers. At the bottom, a single envelope bore her name in Daniel's neat hand. "For Emily, when the time is right." Her breath hitched as she unfolded the letter. The edges were worn, the handwriting familiar. Aaron and Hughes crowded close, their faces unreadable in the filtered light. Emily's fingers trembled as she read, "My dearest friend, if you have found this, know that I could trust no one but you. What lies ahead will test us all, honor and loyalty will be questioned, and only by your courage can we secure our future. Seek Captain Blake. Protect what matters. With gratitude and faith, Daniel." Emily's heart raced. He'd anticipated this moment, written words to guide her. But why mention Blake by name? Did he trust the captain or warn against him? Doubt gnawed at her. She looked up, meeting Aaron's gaze as he bowed his head respectfully. "He trusts you," Aaron said, voice low. "He knew you'd follow." Emily clutched the letter to her chest. "But does he trust you?" she whispered. The question hung between them, fragile as mist. Aaron's silence spoke volumes. Emily closed her eyes, steeling herself. Every relationship here was laced with hidden motives. Her kindness had brought her into this world of codes and secrets. Now she had to navigate it, trusting her instincts and the bonds that had formed around the fire. The crates lay open, promises waiting in ink and paper. Emily stepped forward, determined in her stride. "Then let's secure our future," she said, voice steady. "Together." And as the morning light filtered through the canopy, Emily felt the first tremors of betrayal and loyalty stirring within her, threads that would bind her to this mission and to those she had begun to call allies. Emily knelt among the overturned crates, her fingers still trembling as she folded Daniel's letter back into its oilcloth wrapping. Sunlight slanted through the broken roof of the old warehouse, painting dust motes in gold. Around her, Captain Blake inspected other supplies and Sergeant Hughes carefully lifted sealed canisters marked medical. Riley leaned against a nearby pillar, pale and wide-eyed, as though the weight of their discovery had hollowed her out. Emily rose, brushing grit from her jeans. "We've got what we came for," she said, her voice echoing in the hollow space. "Let's move it to the camp." Aaron nodded and signaled to the soldiers. They began hauling crates outside, stacking them near the ridge where tents waited in neat rows. As the men worked, Emily pulled Riley aside. "Hey," she whispered, keeping her voice low. "You okay?" Riley's eyes flicked toward Aaron and Hughes, then back to Emily. She swallowed hard. "En kingitokitu." Emily glanced at the captain, whose back was turned. She nodded. "Of course." They slipped into a shadowed corner where the ivy choked the crumbling wall. Riley's expression was torn between fear and something else. Guilt, maybe. Her voice trembled. "Emily, I haven't been entirely honest." Emily's heart thudded. "What do you mean?" Riley looked down, fingers twisting together. "Before I came on this mission, I sent a message to someone at the diner." Emily's brow creased. "Who?" Riley's breath caught. "Uncle Ollie." Emily blinked. Ollie, the warm-hearted cook who treated everyone like family? Why? Riley looked up, tears glistening. "He's with someone else. Someone who watches Fort Ashford. He wanted information." Emily's pulse quickened. "Information." Riley nodded, voice barely audible. "It started when he saw you with Captain Blake in Market Square. He thought maybe you were hiding something. He called a man, his friend, I think, who works at the base as a contractor. He asked if you'd really been helping that soldier. He wanted to know if you were a threat." Emily's fingers curled into a fist. "But you didn't tell me?" Riley's lips quivered. "I didn't know how. He said he was worried about Lucas, about us. He thought I was keeping secrets from my only family." Emily's chest ached. "Riley, your uncle betrayed me." Riley's shoulders shook. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do." Emily closed her eyes, struggling to steady her breath. Trust, she learned, was fragile. She had thought Riley her ally, her friend in an impossible situation. Now that bond felt stained by doubt. She swallowed and laid a hand on Riley's shoulder. "You should have told me sooner," she said quietly. Emily caught Aaron's eye and gave him a small nod. He fell into step beside her. "Everything all right?" he asked gently. Emily clenched her teeth. "We'll keep moving." Inside, A storm of emotions roiled. Hurt, anger, betrayal, but she forced calm into her voice. There was no room for turmoil if they were to finish this mission. That night, after the camp settled into uneasy sleep, Emily slipped from her tent and made her way to Riley's. The moonlight filtered through pine branches, casting shifting patterns on the forest floor. Riley sat on her cot, knees drawn to her chest, tears staining her cheeks. Emily crouched beside her. "I talked to Captain Blake," Emily began softly. Riley flinched as though expecting harsh judgment. But Emily's voice remained gentle. "He wants to confront Ollie tomorrow to find out who else might be involved." Riley wiped her eyes. "Please don't hate him too much," she whispered. Emily shook her head. "We'll figure this out. But you need to tell me everything that happened at the diner. I need to know who's behind this." Riley nodded, taking a deep breath. "Ollie, he's been receiving calls for weeks. At first, just questions about food deliveries and regular customers. Then, after you spent that evening talking to Captain Blake, before we even knew who he was, the calls changed. They asked about you." Emily's jaw tightened. "Ollie didn't know who I was with? He didn't know you were working with us?" Riley shook her head. "He thought you'd lost your mind. He thought you were in danger." Emily closed her eyes, picturing Ollie's broad grin and easy laughter. She had never suspected him of fear, let alone conspiracy. "He's protecting us," she murmured. "But at what cost?" Riley shrugged, tears still glistening. "He'd do anything for family." Emily studied her friend in the pale light. "I know." She laid her hand on Riley's. "And I love him for it. But we need to be sure we can trust the people around us." Riley nodded. "I understand." Emily squeezed her hand. "Get some rest." As she slipped back to her own tent, Emily felt the first real hesitation in her confidence. Betrayal, she realized, could come from the gentlest heart. Morning arrived in muted gray. Emily stood before the crates, locket safely tucked into her jacket. Soldiers prepared to load supplies onto wagons. Riley and Ollie stood at the edge of camp, waiting. Emily approached them, her heart pounding. Ollie's face lit up at the sight of her, but his eyes flicked anxiously to Riley. "Ollie," Emily began, voice steady. "Riley told me about the calls." Ollie's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Em. I never meant to put you in danger. I lost sleep thinking you were with those soldiers who'd taken a stranger's order. I thought," his voice cracked, "I thought I could stop it before it got worse." Emily's chest tightened. "Who was calling?" Ollie closed his eyes, shame coloring his cheeks. "A man named Carl." Emily froze. That name meant nothing to her, but then Riley gasped. "Carl Forrester," she whispered. "He's the base contractor." Emily's mind raced. Carl Forrester, a civilian engineer who worked occasionally with Fort Ashford, rumored to have ties to military intelligence. He had access, he had reach. He could feed information to anyone. She glanced at Captain Blake, who watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. Betrayal had teeth. It had left them open to scrutiny, to manipulation. Emily turned back to Ollie. "Did he ever say why he was watching me?" Ollie ran a hand through his hair. "He said you were involved in something dangerous. He asked if you'd turned traitor, if you were passing information to spies." Emily's breath hitched. Spies. The possibility sent a chill through her. Riley clutched her hand. Emily squared her shoulders. "Thank you for telling me." Ollie nodded, tears in his eyes. "Just be careful." Emily managed a small smile. "I will." She stepped away and summoned Captain Blake and Sergeant Hughes. "We have a security breach," she said. Their faces darkened. Emily relayed Carl Forrester's interference and the risk he posed. Blake's jaw tightened. "He'll need to be dealt with," he said, quietly. Emily nodded. "I agree." As they organized a small patrol to intercept Forrester on his next visit to the site, Emily felt a cold resolve settle in her bones. The world she'd entered was far murkier than she'd imagined. Kindness had drawn her in, loyalty had bound her to these soldiers, but betrayal had followed close behind, hidden in the voice of a man she'd trusted. That afternoon, in a narrow corridor beneath the base's main building, Carl Forrester sat at a metal desk, tapping at a laptop. He looked up sharply when Aaron and Emily entered, his confident smile thin. "Captain Blake," he said smoothly, "and you must be Emily Miller." His gaze lingered on her locket peeking from her pocket. "I hear you've been busy collecting old war relics." His tone was mocking. Emily inhaled, stepping forward. "You've been passing information to strangers about me and my mission," she said evenly. Forrester's smile faltered. "I was concerned for your safety," he replied. "These soldiers, your stranger, could have been spies or worse." Emily's eyes narrowed. "You betrayed me." Forrester's shoulders slumped. "I did what I thought was right." Blake's voice cut in. "You compromised the operation." He reached into his pocket and produced handcuffs. "You're under arrest." As they led Forrester away, Emily felt the bitter sting of salvation. Betrayal had come again, but this time she had faced it and conquered. The crates awaited at the ridge, the mission still called to her, and somewhere in the dark corners of the forest, Daniel's secret lay, waiting to be revealed once more. At that moment, Emily understood that trust would always be a risk, but without it, she would have no path forward. And as she watched Forrester disappear into custody, she vowed never to let fear guide her again. The war of secrets had only just begun. Emily woke before dawn, the sky still bruised with the promise of rain. She stepped from her tent into a damp world where every blade of grass glistened with moisture. The camp's canvas walls sagged under the weight of night's downpour, and low murmurs rose among the soldiers as they prepared for the day. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. Something about this morning felt different, heavy with expectation. She drew the locket from her pocket, its metal cool against her palm, and ran her thumb over the faded photograph inside. Daniel's eyes seemed to plead for her courage. As the first drops fell again, Captain Blake gathered the men. "Today we move deeper into Blackwood Ridge," he announced, voice firm despite the soggy air. "Supplies must reach our forward outpost before the storm worsens." Emily joined the line, boots sinking into soft mud. Each step was a reminder that the terrain here was unforgiving, and that failure would cost more than comfort. She clenched the letter Daniel had written, feeling its edges crinkle. Somewhere out there, he waited on her choices. By mid-morning, the rain had turned the forest floor into a quagmire. Soldiers slipped in the mud, rifles ringing out as they corrected their grip. Emily helped hoist a crate of medical supplies onto a makeshift sled, her arms trembling under its weight. Around her, men pushed struggling wagons. Clouds of breath and mist rose like ghosts between the pines. An urgent tension settled in her lungs. If the path collapsed under them, the supplies and the mission would drown in the mire. Halfway to the ridge, Riley stumbled, twisting her ankle on a hidden root. A cry of pain cut through the steady drum of rain. Emily dropped her end of the sled and knelt beside her friend. Riley's face was pale, tears streaking through streaks of grime. I can't walk," she gasped. The captain rushed over. "We'll send a detachment back," he ordered, voice tight. But Emily interrupted. "No, Riley's been through too much to leave her." She felt a surge of protectiveness, not only for Riley, but for the promise she'd made to keep everyone safe. "Let me help her." Aaron hesitated, torn between military protocol and respect for Emily's decision. At last he nodded. "Fine. Emily, spare what you must to get Riley back." Together they fashioned a sling, and Emily supported her friend as they retraced their steps through the swirling rain. Each soaked branch and muddy rut felt like an obstacle not just in the forest, but within Emily's own resolve. Could she save everyone and still honor Daniel's trust? Back at the main trail, a shout echoed through the trees. Emily's heart leapt. Supplies were under attack. She and Aaron ran toward the sound, emerging onto a slope where soldiers crouched behind fallen logs, rifles raised at shadowy figures darting between trunks. Smoke curled around moss-covered stones. Small explosions of gunfire punctuated the storm's drumbeat. "They knew we were coming," he said, voice like gravel. "Someone tipped them off." Emily thought of Carl Forrester's betrayal, of Ollie's fearful whispers. Now, once again, her mission had been compromised by secrets she hadn't uncovered in time. Rain stung her face as she ordered the men back to defensive formation. Bullets thudded into the slick earth around them, and Emily realized that the forest, once a place of memory and promise, had become a trap. Soldiers returned fire, their disciplined volleys echoing through the pines. Emily ducked behind a log, the locket pressed to her heart. She could feel Daniel's presence in the air. Where was he, and what had he left for her? Moments stretched like hours as the firefight raged. Emily's mind raced. Should she pursue the attackers, risking capture? Or focus on regrouping and finding another way to fulfill Daniel's mission? She glanced at Riley, pale but determined, and at the soldiers who looked to her for guidance. Her body ached, but her spirit ignited with purpose. She would not abandon Daniel's trust, nor would she let these men suffer for her mistakes. "Form a defensive perimeter," she called out, voice strong despite the storm. "Send a team to track them, quietly. Captain, cover us." Aaron nodded, eyes fierce with respect. Emily knelt to retrieve the scattered letters from the mud, gathering what she could. Each damp page was a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Though her hands shook, she pressed them into a waterproof pouch and tucked it beneath her jacket. As the rain intensified, Emily faced a choice that weighed on her soul. Follow the safe path back to camp with the wounded and the crestfallen soldiers, or chase the raiders into the darkness, risking everything for that single bundle of hope. Her brother's face flashed in her mind, Lucas waiting for her return, his world dependent on her safety. Yet Daniel's plea echoed louder. Only she could lead them home. With a steady breath, Emily rose, mud-splattered and resolute. She looked at Riley, at Aaron, and the men forming their lines, and she made her choice. "Signal Sergeant Hughes," she ordered. "I'm going after our message. If I don't make it back, you know where to find me." Riley squeezed her hand. "Be safe," she whispered. Emily managed a small, courageous smile. "I will." She strode into the downpour, the forest closing around her like a living thing. Each step carried her deeper into danger, deeper into the heart of betrayal and loyalty intertwined. As thunder rumbled overhead, Emily felt the full weight of her mission, and she embraced it. The path forward would be perilous, but she knew that only by facing the storm head-on could she honor the trust placed in her and protect the lives that depended on her bravery. In that moment, soaked to the bone and armed only with her conviction, Emily Miller became more than a stranger in the woods. She became their guide through the darkest of nights. Emily's boots sank deep into the churned earth as she pushed through the curtain of fir branches. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle, turning every needle and leaf into a jeweled weight. Ahead, flickers of torchlight danced among the trees. Her breath came in quick gusts, each exhale visible in the cool air. She gripped the locket beneath her jacket, its weight a constant reminder of Daniel's faith in her. She crept closer and saw the raiders' makeshift camp hidden in a shallow ravine. Dark green tarps flapped between pines, and a low fire crackled in the center, smoke twisting upward like a plea for mercy. Men in tattered uniforms, the very ones she'd trained with, huddled around crates of medical supplies. Their faces were hard, eyes void of the brotherhood she'd come to cherish. At the fire's edge stood Sergeant Bradley, his once proud stripes torn off, replaced by the ragged symbol of a rebel band. Bradley held the missing oilcloth bundle in one hand, shaking out Daniel's letter like a prize. His lips curled in triumph. "I knew that stranger would lead us right to the goods," he spat. "With these supplies, we'll carve out our own command. No more starving, no more orders from ground-choked officers." Emily's heart thundered. She raised her hand in salute, a soldier's sign, but her voice came in a harsh whisper. "Bradley." He froze, head whipping around. "Who's there?" His men leveled rifles toward the darkness. Emily stepped into the light, raising both hands. "It's me, Emily Miller." Their eyes widened. Even Bradley's surprise was genuine. "How did you find us?" Bradley demanded, stepping forward. "Traitor girl, One of his men muttered. Emily's jaw clenched. You took what wasn't yours. You betrayed your oath. Rain dripped from her hair, glinting on her eyelashes like tiny stars. Bradley laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. An oath? Oaths starve you. I choose my family and they choose me. Daniel's orders be damned. He tapped the bundle. This letter promises freedom. Freedom from blind obedience. We'll deliver its contents to the highest bidder. Emily's blood ran cold. She realized then that Daniel's true test wasn't to free soldiers from war, but to save them from themselves. He'd trusted her to bring hope, not to light the fuse of rebellion. She dropped to one knee, hands still raised. You don't understand. Read it again. Read every word. Bradley snatched the letter, tearing the bundle open. Thunder rolled overhead as he scanned the lines. His face turned ashen. Emily recognized the passage he read. A plea from Daniel to deliver the message to Captain Blake, to call off hostilities and bring men home. The letter spoke of peace, of a ceasefire written by Daniel himself after seeing too much death. Bradley's fingers trembled. Peace, he whispered, voice raw. He asked for peace. A soldier behind him shook his head. This is a trap. Bradley's jaw worked. We killed our own for this? His gaze snapped to Emily. Why didn't you tell us? Emily rose, rain plastering her hair to her face. I thought you wanted to save lives. I thought you'd listen. She swallowed hard. He trusted you. He trusted all of us. Look at what you've become. Behind Bradley, footsteps broke through the hush. Captain Blake emerged, rifle in hand, Riley at his side, muddy but resolute. Soldiers from the main camp formed a ring around the ravine's rim, rifles leveled at Bradley's men. The scene felt unreal. Two armies facing off under dripping pines, the only witness of the weary moon. Blake's voice cut through the tension. Stand down, Bradley. You're surrounded. Bradley spat into the mud. Arrest me, then. I'll die by my own choice. Blake's eyes softened as he stepped closer. This isn't your fight anymore. His gaze settled on Emily. She brought you the truth. Bradley's shoulders slumped. For the first time, the tough edge in his eyes flickered. He dropped the letter. I never wanted this, he muttered, looking from Emily to the ring of rifles. I just wanted a chance. Emily's throat tightened. Daniel gave you a chance for peace. She gestured to the letter lying trampled in mud. That choice is still yours. In the hush that followed, the only sound was the rain and a lone owl's call. Soldiers lowered their rifles. Bradley stepped forward, hands raised. Blake's men moved in, cuffing him gently. Emily exhaled, trembling as relief and sorrow warred inside her. Moments later, the fire was extinguished and the battered supplies reloaded. Bradley and his rebels, now prisoners, watched as Emily, Blake, and their soldiers prepared to leave the ravine. Emily pressed the locket to her heart, a silent vow to honor Daniel's wish. The march out was slow. The forest, once a battleground, now felt like a living tomb where hopes had almost died. Emily walked between Blake and Riley, her boots caked in mud. At the ridge, she paused and turned to look back at the pines, their trunks dark columns against the gray sky. Aaron came beside her, soft-spoken. You did it, he said. You saved them. Emily swallowed, her voice tight. I couldn't have done it without you. He offered a gentle smile. We're stronger together. As they reached the forward outpost, two wounded soldiers on stretchers were carried to waiting medics. A hush fell among the men when Emily held up Daniel's letter, now dry but smeared. This was written by one of our own, she announced. He asked for this message to end our fight. We will honor it. A general's aide stepped forward with a transceiver. Emily spoke into it, voice steady despite the weight in her chest. This is Captain Blake. We have secured the message. Request immediate ceasefire. She passed the device to Blake, who relayed to High Command. Wheels of war began to slow. That evening, after the rain had cleared, Emily stood on the mud-slick parade ground outside Fort Ashford. The setting sun painted the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. Soldiers fielded information, their damp uniforms glistening. Emily managed a small smile. Daniel saved us. He just needed someone to listen. She held up the locket. I'll take it back to his family. They drank in silence, watching the men around them. Somewhere beyond the gates, the world prepared to breathe easy again. The next morning, Emily left Fort Ashford behind and headed home. The path through Maple Avenue felt different now, clean, sunlit, alive. She carried the locket in one hand and a fresh loaf of bread in the other, destined for Lucas and Ollie. At the park bench, she paused. The spot where she'd first met Daniel was empty, a single daisy pushing through a crack in the stone. She placed the bread on the bench and whispered, "Thank you." A breeze stirred the petals, and Emily knew, somehow, that Daniel's spirit would live on in every act of kindness and every choice for peace. At home, Lucas bounded into her arms the moment she opened the door. Ollie stood by the stove, wiping his hands on a towel, hope shining in his eyes. Emily knelt to hug them both. "I'm here," she said softly, "and I brought you two things, bread and a promise. No matter how dark the world gets, we can always choose light." As they sat down to breakfast, the early sun streamed through the window, warming their tired faces. And though the echoes of war still lingered in distant forests, Emily felt peace settle in her bones. She had guided them through the darkest nights and returned them safely home, just as Daniel had asked. And in that guidance, she had discovered her own strength, her own path from kindness to courage. The road ahead would always hold challenges, betrayals, and storms to weather. But Emily knew now that every choice mattered, every heart could be redeemed, and every message of peace was worth fighting for. And as she sipped her tea, she felt a quiet pride. In a single act of compassion, she had altered the course of many lives and learned that true power lay in the simple promise to bring others home. The dawn light filtered softly through the gauzy curtains of Emily's bedroom window, painting the walls in pale gold. She lay awake a moment longer, the mattress creaking beneath her, listening to the distant hum of the awakening city. Outside, birds called as the sun climbed higher, promising warmth after the night's chill. Yet, within Emily, a quieter stirring had taken root, a sense of completion tinged with the sobering weight of what she had witnessed. She rose and dressed in simple clothes, a faded blue sweater and jeans, the locket tucked beneath her shirt, close to her heart. In the kitchen, Lucas sat at the table, spooning cereal as Ollie sipped coffee nearby, the familiar rhythms of home unfolding around her. Emily filled 2 mugs, the rich steam curling upward like a benediction, and set one before Ollie, then turned to Lucas. "Ready for your field trip today?" she asked softly. Lucas grinned, spoon paused midair. "Yes, we're going to the War Museum," he said, voice bright with innocent enthusiasm. Emily's chest tightened. The place where she and her mother once walked among relics of sacrifice would now hold her own story among them. She managed a smile. "I'll come with you," she decided. "We'll take the early car so we can be there for the opening." As they drove through Maple Avenue, the world seemed impossible unchanged. Cafes opened their doors, commuters boarded buses, and the morning sun gilded storefronts. Yet Emily saw these things anew, each act of daily life a testament to resilience, to the ordinary triumphs she'd once taken for granted. Lucas chatted about which exhibit he wanted to see. The diorama of trench warfare, the display on aircraft innovations, the wall of honor bearing names of the fallen. Emily's thoughts drifted to Daniel's letter, its plea for peace echoing in his careful words. She wondered which exhibit would most honor his memory. At the museum's entrance, a guard greeted them with a nod. Inside, glass cases gleamed under spotlights, each artifact a silent testament to courage and loss. Lucas tugged at Emily's hand, leading her toward a case containing letters from soldiers to home. She watched him peer at the fountain pen curls of cursive script, eyes wide with wonder. A knot formed in her throat. They rounded a corner to a special exhibit recently installed, Stories of Compassion. How small acts shaped history. Emily's breath caught when she saw the display. There, beneath glass, lay the battered oilcloth she'd retrieved, the weathered letter on which Daniel had poured his soul, and the faded photograph from the locket. A placard explained, Lieutenant Daniel Crawford refused further orders to continue fighting, instead composing a ceasefire appeal that was smuggled through unlikely channels. A local civilian, Emily Miller, followed his call and delivered the message, preventing a mutiny that could have cost countless lives. Below that, a quote in Daniel's handwriting. Only through compassion can we find our way home. Lucas read the words aloud. Only through compassion. Home? Who's Emily Miller? He asked, tilting his head. Emily took a steadying breath. I am, she said quietly. A small crowd had gathered, curious patrons, a museum docent, and even Captain Blake, standing a few steps away in uniform, his medals catching the light. He offered Emily a gentle salute. She returned it, hand still clutching Lucas's. The docent approached, eyes bright. Your courage inspired this exhibit, she said. Would you join us for a short dedication? Visitors would love to hear from you. Emily hesitated, glancing at Ollie, whose eyes shimmered with pride and unshed tears. She looked at Lucas, whose admiration battled with his youthful confusion. Finally, she nodded. Together they walked to the small dais arranged before the display. Emily spoke in a voice that quavered only once, then steadied like iron. She told them of that misty morning in the park, of how a simple sandwich sparked an unlikely chain of events. She described the betrayal of trust and the burden of choice, the moment she stood before Bradley in the ravine and realized how close they had come to catastrophe. I thought I was just helping one man, she said, looking out at the faces illuminated by curiosity and compassion. But in truth, we were all bound by a promise to protect one another, even when fear threatened to tear us apart. Daniel trusted that promise. I hope, in some small way, that we've honored it. Applause rose, gentle and respectful. Emily returned to Lucas's side, feeling the lightness of purpose lift her spirits. They wandered through the rest of the exhibit hand in hand, pausing at artifacts that testified to mercy, an envelope of stamps sent to prisoners of war, a photograph of children finding bread hidden under winter coats, a diary entry about a nurse who defied orders to tend enemy wounded. Each story reinforced the truth Emily already knew. In the crucible of conflict, compassion was both the spark and the safeguard. Later, as they stepped into the midday sun, Lucas tugged Emily aside. Mom, he said, voice earnest, do you think I could help someone again someday? Like you helped Daniel? Emily knelt to his level, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. If you ever see someone in need, and your heart tells you they're struggling, help them, she said. Even the smallest kindness can change more than you know. Lucas nodded vigorously, eyes alight. I will. On the drive home, Emily's phone buzzed. It was a message from Captain Blake, Operation After Action Report, peace negotiations initiated. You've made the difference, Emily. She replied with a simple thank you, and set the phone aside. Her mind returned to the moral questions she still carried. Was it right to involve herself so deeply in a military conflict? Could a civilian ever truly understand the cost of war? She glanced at the locket beneath her shirt, its weight a constant reminder of Daniel's sacrifice, and found her answer in his faith. That evening, the three of them, Emily, Lucas, and Ollie, sat around their kitchen table. Lucas drew pictures of the exhibits he'd seen, colors bright with optimism. Ollie prepared dinner. Pasta with tomato sauce, garlic bread, and a salad of fresh greens. The aroma filled the room, a feast born of ordinary abundance. Emily placed Daniel's locket at the center of the table, between plates. This belonged to a man who taught me how powerful one person's belief in another can be, she explained. I want us to remember that, always. Lucas nodded solemnly, then shook his head in confusion. But Grandma would say the biggest thing is love, he declared. Emily smiled, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She was right, she said. Love is the greatest power we have. Love and compassion. Ollie lifted his glass of water. To love, then he toasted. And to those who remind us of it. They clinked glasses, and in that simple gesture, Emily felt the final threads of her journey weave into a tapestry of hope. Later, after Lily had mopped the floor and Lucas was tucked into bed with the locket lay open on her lap, the photograph within illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp. She closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Daniel." She thought of the boy with the haunted green eyes, of the crackling campfires and the muddy ravine, and of every choice that had led her here. In the deep hush, she recognized the delicate balance between duty and mercy, the delicate line that separated courage from recklessness. She understood now that the true victories of life were not measured in territory gained or battles won, but in the lives saved, the hearts healed, and the promises kept. As the night wrapped its velvet dark around the house, Emily rose and replaced the locket in her pocket. She knew the world would continue to bring storms, betrayals, conflicts, moments of despair. But she also knew that even the smallest act of kindness, when given with a brave heart, could shift the course of many lives. And that knowledge, more than medals or history books, was the legacy she would carry forward. Tomorrow, she would return to the Ember and Ash Diner, to the steaming coffee urn and the matching booths, to Ollie's jokes and Riley's laughter. She would serve eggs and toast and hand out sandwiches to strangers in need. But she would do so with a deeper understanding of what it meant to be both giver and guardian, both civilian and guide. Every serving, every smile, would be an echo of the promise she had once carried through the forest. That compassion, above all else, was the force that could bring us home. And in that promise, Emily found her own path to peace. If you found this story powerful, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Your support helps us bring more important stories to light.